After teasing it for over a year, I finally got a Mac, which means I can start reviewing Apple-only productivity apps. And in this video, I'm going to review one of the most requested apps, which is Things Tree. Let's begin by discussing the ideal settings for Things Tree. I'm going to go to Preferences, Move completed items to Logbook. I've set that to immediately. This is a personal choice though. I think it's better to do it this way. It just saves you some time. Batch counts, I'm actually going to do today, and inbox to see how many items live within these lists. You can group to-dos in the today list by their associated project or area. I've turned that on. I've turned on preserve window width when resizing the sidebar, personal preference, and enabling things URLs. This is a setting I will not go through in detail in this video, but I have turned it on. If you have a mobile device that is also from Apple, then you can use Things Cloud to synchronize your settings. I don't have one yet, so I don't need to turn it on. And you will not see any iPhone settings for things in this video, but rest assured it functions pretty much the same way. Quick Entry is a super powerful tool that you'll definitely want to turn on, both the enable shortcut for Quick Entry as well as with autofill. And what that means we'll go through in just a moment when we discuss capturing. If you use Apple Reminders, you can automatically show to-dos from this app in your inbox. In other words, you have a new way to capture, which includes Siri as well for dictation. And you can import your calendar events and show that in the upcoming list if you wish. Under File, when it comes to settings, if you're using Reminders, Todoist, or a few other apps, there is an import functionality that you can use here. You can set up a light or dark mode under Appearance, under View. So how do we capture new inputs into things? Well, fortunately, the inbox list is already created for us. We don't have to do anything extra for that. And under File, you can select New To Do, which will automatically get parked into the inbox as such. Now there's also a short key for that. You can do Command+N, and it also triggers the same menu. It doesn't end there though. Things has a few great settings for out-of-app task creation as well. The first being widgets, which you can configure by editing widgets here, and you can also see another one which I'll get into later in the video. This today list also has a plus button, and when you press that button, it will prompt an overlay menu that will get automatically parked into the inbox, as you can see here. There's also a hotkey that you can use regardless of what you're doing to make the same menu appear. You can also configure this hotkey yourself, which you saw under the settings section of this video. So I'm just going to press that hotkey right now, and you'll see that the same menu appears. One of the coolest things though is when you actually go to a web page and you again press the same button. I'm on this landing page for my Todoist course here. Now let's say you want to take a look at this course for later, make up your mind whether you want to use it or not. You can press the same short key, and as you can see, it captures the web page title and link for you to refer to later. You can go on with what you were doing, just like that. Before we dive into clarifying input from the inbox, we first need to organize our system for Clarence the copywriter in a way that makes sense so that we can then move it into places and assign labels to it, etc. So let's see what I've done here for Clarence is, first of all, set up some lists and folders on the left-hand side. You will see that I've created a separate list for standalone items. These are tasks that can be completed on their own without a project required for it. However, this list format can be also used for projects. We'll get into that in just a moment. I've also added a separate list for agendas, which can have separate sections, which you can add by going to File and pressing New Heading. That's what they're called, and under there you can have specific items. In this case, these are individual people that Clarence may want to interact with, or when he sees them, this is what he'll want to discuss, including with his own dog, for example, Doug the dog. And if you use checklists, which I've done here, then you can add any talking points you want to bring up with Doug. In this case, that it needs to stop shitting in the neighbor's garden because Clarence has been receiving some complaints. So once he's addressed this topic with Doug the dog, you can mark it complete as such, but he doesn't have to mark the item complete because he'll likely have some more interactions with Doug in the future. Of course, Clarence has a few clients as well. He has a newsletter client that he writes for, a blog client, and an ebook client. If he ever meets with them, he can also use this method again by double-clicking on the task itself and then pressing checklist to add any talking points as such. Now you'll see that here we have a few different looking items. These are actually what are called areas inside of things. You can add a new list or area or project as it's called in this menu at the left bottom corner. And as it says, an area is supposed to represent an area of focus in GTD terms as well, where you can group projects underneath into. And this is a good thing. I like that they've done this. However, what I don't like is that it's just one level deep. What I would have liked to do for Clarence here is set up a work area of focus, and within there you can have areas dedicated to specific clients like I've done here. However, that's not possible. So you're also going to have to decide what level of organization you're going to apply to your system. Are you going to be okay with having quite a lot of these areas because you may have dozens of areas of focus or sub areas that you'll want to define? Or are you going to go with one work area and perhaps what is a separate list here, you can group it under specific headings with checklists? That's up to you, but I've done this approach here where every sub area of focus, every individual client that Clarence has gets their own area. And in there, inside of that area, you'll see these lists that each cover separate projects with their associated tasks. Under Higher Horizons, we have a couple of lists as well, including goals. For Clarence, he wants to get 5 new clients by the end of November. We have a vision for Clarence. He wants to eventually move away from copywriting and become an inspiring book author. And his purpose he's defined as helping people become more creative. So that's probably what his books are also going to be about. Lastly, we have an area for reference material. And the cool thing here is, as you can see, you can also park tasks inside of an empty area on its own. So you'll see, as with Higher Horizons here, that have sublists inside of it, what those lists are as well. But if I press the hotkey for a new task, I can also add that directly to the area itself. So you have some freedom there with how you want to interpret this. So for reference, it's up to you whether you want to use tags. Speaking of which, you can edit those by going to Window and selecting Tags. From here, you can set up tags like Next for next actions, Waiting for items you're waiting for from others, and Contexts, which I also like to indicate with a special symbol ahead of it, as it makes it easier to search for them. So here we have a few contexts for Clarence. His work involves analyzing data. It involves being creative and having a mind mapping context for those types of tasks. And of course, writing. Back to the lists, we have a couple of pre-configured lists like the inbox we already discussed. A today list where any item that is assigned the date of today will live inside of an upcoming list for future items, and any time list for tasks that have no associated date with them, and a someday list which is automatically generated by marking an item or a project as someday, so we don't have to create that separately. Interestingly, you're unable to add headers inside of the someday maybe section though, so that's something to be aware of. What I also don't like as much is that I'm unable to actually position a list underneath or between areas. It seems that Things is quite strict on how you can position them, and it's lists on the top and areas at the bottom. Now you can move those items in between each other, but if I were to move this area up top, for example, it just doesn't allow me to do it. The same goes for the list. It will park it inside of an area instead of moving it underneath it. I really dislike that Things does not have a tag menu on the left-hand side as many other apps do to easily access them and see associated items. However, it does have a super intuitive search menu. You don't even need to activate any special search option. You can just type. For example, we had a writing tag. We can just press W and immediately this prompt shows up, which is called Quick Find. And from there, we can find the tag and all of the associated tasks inside of it. Now that our lists are set up, let's have a look at clarifying and how it works. We added a task from the overlay option here, so let's double click that so we can actually give it a proper name. For example, clean up Google Drive. Clarence has a lot of old drafts in there that he no longer needs, and it's time to clean it all up. Then let's look at the options we have for clarification. First being when. When does this need to take place? This is essentially the start date for the task, because there is also a deadline option which is different from the when option. And here's also where we could move it into someday, which will automatically move it into the someday list that we already looked at. This evening is a shortcut option as well as today, but there is no option for doing it in 3 days or in a week as you have with TickTick and Todoist, for example. But nevertheless, it's quite a simple setup. You can just scroll through the dates and select one. For GTD purposes, it's going to be important to assign tags. Let's say this is the next action. And then we've added the tag. And from that menu on the left bottom corner now, we can also add a context. Now, I would say none of these apply. So we can actually add a new one. Let's just say laptop. And we can create it directly from within this menu. So we don't have to go to the tags menu. However, just to double check whether it's parked correctly, it isn't. It is possible to have nested tags, which I like for keeping it organized. So I just went to the menu here, and there I added to the context menu as such. We don't need to add a checklist in this case. You can add a description and treat this as a note if you wish, but we won't need to do that either. Here's where we add the deadline. So this is different from when, and we can add one if we feel the need to do so. I'm not going to do that here. I try to stay away from deadlines as much as possible. And then we can just move it into the standalone items list as such. And it says one to do was moved out of the inbox as well. And here we have it, perfectly visible where it should be. Now let's look at this in a bit more detail. Here we have this newsletter for client A area of focus, the newsletter client, and we can open a specific project from here. For example, let's say publish newsletter number 38. Let's see what we have in there. We have 2 tasks, selecting topics from content curation and writing the drafts. The project already has a deadline assigned to it, so you can set that up from here. It even can receive its own tags, which personally I do not recommend because these projects are multi-step outcomes and only those associated tasks need to be tagged with their context, perhaps with time estimates if you wish as well, or energy levels even. However, the time associations could be useful. In fact, by pressing the when menu, we can move this entire project, including its associated tags, to the someday list. So let's see how that works. Here, the project is the same. However, it is no longer present underneath this active focus area. And instead, we can find it here. And the cool thing is that it remembers the area it originally belonged to, which means if we move it back out of someday, maybe by clearing the someday menu or just assigning it to today, for example's sake, it automatically shows up back into the area it originally belonged to. I like how projects can have unique descriptions, which you can add under notes. So these are associated with the list, not with any specific task, but those tasks as well can receive a description by double clicking them. And also there, you can add details as such. And by double clicking, you can always view them. This description means it's also possible to treat tasks as notes inside of things, because there's quite an extensive menu. Also, you have markup to your disposal for writing down notes more elaborately. And if that were the case, let's say I wanted to save this Todoist course as a reference material item, all I would need to do is just move it into there. However, the big problem I have with this, we see a few other articles that are relevant to Clarence for his work, is that they can be marked complete. And this is something, in my opinion, Notes should not have the option to do, because it's so easy to misclick accidentally and then you lose sight of it, right? That's not what we want to have. So I hope things will improve on this in future versions. If you want to look back on your progress or just see how things are going, you have quite a few options at your disposal. The first being a very cool little detail that I really like. For example, we have this project here. Let's say I mark one of the items complete. You'll see that this circle is now half full, both in the main view as well as on the sidebar here. Same happens if I did 2 out of 3. It automatically recognizes the pie chart is going to be filled up proportionally. So that way you can have an easy overview without even needing to read into a project to see what the progress is. You also have access to a logbook, which shows you exactly what you've done, when you've done it, although it is a bit limited in my opinion in terms of the filtering options. You don't have access to a menu that says, okay, I want to see everything from last week, last month, etc. But eventually you'll be able to find everything inside of the logbook. And by using the checklist functionality, you can also craft your own weekly review task, of course, and set up your ritual here and just go through it to make sure you don't miss anything. Okay, now as for engaging, obviously one of the most important aspects of any productivity software, we want to be able to easily see what we can do at this time, at the place we're at the context we're in. But as I said earlier, there's no way to easily view tags. So you'll have to rely on something called Quick Find, which allows you to just type the name of any context, as I just did. I wasn't clicking anything else. You can just start typing and it will search for it. Now, the cool thing here is the special symbol that, in my case, I use the colon for context, allows you to quickly see every context at a glance and just go from there. See every task that is related to analyzing, for example. And again, filter for next actions only. That's how you can do it inside of the app. Fortunately, there are some other ways to do it that actually don't involve the app itself directly. Instead, they involve Mac OS widgets, which you can set up by pressing the time here and then editing your widgets. The most important ingredient here is that you have the next and the context tags both activated. And from there, you can see all the tasks that have this set of tags. The problem, though, is it doesn't show the associated project from within the list. So we have write draft, and finish draft. That doesn't tell us much here. So what Clarence is going to have to do is actually click on it, and from there he'll be led to the task in question and see what it is about. In this case, actually, it's newsletter 38 instead of 37 or something else. In terms of the company behind things, they're called Cultured Code. They have a large following on social media. They are highly praised. Top that with an average 4.7 rating based on hundreds of ratings in the App Store. It's safe to try. If you want to try out Thinkstree, then you can get it for $49.99 US in the App Store, and your price may actually vary based on your location. Cultured Code themselves just set a tier price, and then Apple defines it based on your currency, and they have no control over it. However, it is a one-time fee. Now, that fee is different for the app for Mac, iPhone, and iPad. I recommend you first start with their trial. It's 15 days. You can try it out for free and make sure that it's something you want to use. So all in all, Things Tree is not perfect, but still a solid choice if you want to do GTD on your Apple device. I've got more Apple-only tools coming up on my channel, so make sure to subscribe if that's what you're looking for. But don't worry, non-Apple users, I've got you covered too. There's good stuff coming, so hit subscribe, comment with your questions or experience about Things Tree, and I'll see you in the next video.